So in 2018, Bill Littlefield, who had been a longtime commentator for WBUR, Boston's public radio station, he'd been there for 35 years, he retired. And 25 years of that time, he was the host and the producer of It's Only a Game. Remember that? It's the only sports radio show on all of public radio, right? It was carried on 260 stations for 25 years, including our own KCUR. And if you ever listened to it, you knew it wasn't, it was on Saturday mornings for an hour. It wasn't your average sports show, this is what happened this week in the world of sports. There was a little bit of that. But to be honest, it was, a collection of kind of quirky stories at times, like how the wave got started, or, a race in the Empire State Building up and down the stairs, or the nursing home goes to the racetrack, or a lot of stories that were really critical about what it means to be an American. Stories about race and protest and Colin Kaepernick and how that had been a thing forever. Stories about gender and equity, really stories about what it means to be an American and how we live together on this earth. And when he retired from WBUR in 2018, he also retired from 39 years as a college professor. And he took up something new. People, a friend, a colleague had asked him for years if he would be a volunteer in a classroom filled with prisoners trying to get a college degree from Emerson College, Emerson Prison Initiative. And in the last 4 years, he has written and spoken quite a bit about that. It has been a transformative experience. For one, the students are quite remarkable. They're committed, they're hardworking, they're incredibly fortunate, they feel, to be there. They're aware that there's 100 slots, 100 prisoners who want these 12 slots. So they are all in. They're intelligent and thoughtful and funny. And in all of his teaching career, which has spanned decades, he has never seen a group of students more supportive and encouraging of one another. They are just so all in for one another. Not that they're not honest with their critique of each other's writings, but there's just this incredible passion and care for one another. But it's also been transformative for Bill Littlefield. He said before he began this, like many of us, we've heard our own Holsinger criminal justice professors talk, and many of us have read widely in the field. He knew that there were a lot of people in prison who were in there because of racial discrimination, for low-level crimes like smoking pot, and for coming out of homes and situations in which they really never had a chance. And he also knew that there were some people who had done terrible things and really deserved to be locked up. He no longer believes that last part of it, because now, after the last few years of working with people, 35, 40, 50, who have been locked up now for decades for things that they did when they were 18 and 19, they're no more that person they were at 18 or 19 than me or you. And here they are, put away for the rest of their lives for something they did on the worst day of their life. And we know that among the developed democracies, we are alone in these draconian, ridiculously long sentences that just condemn people to this terrible situation. He wrote a novel this summer, Bill Littlefield did, that kind of has brought together these last 4 years of his experience teaching in the prison. And the book is set on this kind of quiet suburban street in Massachusetts. And it kind of at the center of the novel, there is this crime boss who has been released from prison on kind of one of those mercy things. He's terminally ill, he's been allowed to go home to die. But he's not the only story on the street. Every house has a story. In another street, there's a woman who's trying to decide whether she should stay with her husband or leave him because he spent and lost all of their money in day trading. And then next door, there's another couple who have managed through all the mysteries and highs and lows to stay together. And then there's a 6-year-old girl who kind of watches over the whole thing. It's all these different stories on this street. And all of these people have these highs and lows and ups and downs and heartbreak and heart-wrenching and heart-warming stories. And he ended up naming the book Mercy, because he said that's really the quality that kind of holds all the characters together. It's really what they're all looking for, what they're all yearning for, what they all finally need is mercy. Mercy is what we could call the scripture from this story too this morning. Mercy is really at the very heart of that story. It's a familiar one, right? Joseph, Mary, engaged to be married. An engagement in those days was more like a legal contract, and to break that was more like an annulment. He's decided to put her away quietly, being a righteous person. We don't know. He could have shamed her more. He could have taken a harsher approach. We're not told why he chooses to be gentle and quiet. Maybe he loves her. Maybe he's worried about her. Maybe he's worried about his own reputation. And then the angel comes and convinces him, hey, dude, hang in here. It's not what you think. And again, we're not given the kind of character development in this Joseph that we get in the Hebrew scriptures, right? In the Hebrew scriptures, we've got what? 13 chapters about the Joseph saga. Genesis 37 to Genesis 50. And both of these Josephs are tied together. Both of them, we're told, are the son of somebody named Jacob. Both of their lives are shaped by dreams. Both of them will end up taking their family to Egypt to flee to safety. Both of them will be characters of incredible forgiveness and mercy. Do you remember a little bit of the story in Genesis? Remember that Joseph, he was the favored son of Jacob. His father gave him the coat of many colors, and he had those dreams. He dreamed he was the greatest one. You know, he dreamed that everybody else's sheaf of grain bowed down to him, his brothers. He dreamed that the sun and the moon and the stars, his family, bowed down to him. And unfortunately, he didn't have the emotional intelligence to keep that to himself, right? So he shared that with his brothers and family, and people don't really like to be told that. So when his brothers had an opportunity, they did the wise thing and decided to throw him into a pit. And then they decided, why should we have the blood of our brother? And no, let's just sell him instead to Egyptian traders. So he's sold to the Egyptian traders, and so he goes there, and there's another dream in which he's able to save the people of Egypt, and when he's able to save all of his people, right? And then he acts in this remarkable way of forgiveness when his brothers come desperate and hungry and don't recognize him. Ellen Davis, the very wise Hebrew Bible scholar at Duke, says, what we see in that story, what we see in every single story is this: God does not choose perfect people. God chooses people who are willing to what? Grow and change. I mean, I talked last week about the mistake Christianity has made, this intense individualism, also this intense idea that to be a person of faith is to be perfect or pure. No. All you have to do is just be willing to change and grow, right? And it's not just people that way, it's also our relationships. What you see in the Joseph saga, which comes to us at the end of all the Genesis stories, is this: God works through damaged people in badly damaged relationships. It happens over and over and over again, and the goal is always reconciliation, but the reconciliation does not erase the past. That would be nice, but it doesn't. Nor do you end up being a perfect person. You just end up being a person that says, I'm willing to do this relationship different than I did yesterday. I'm willing to hang in there and try and reach a little bit more. That is exactly what my hero, Danielle Sered, has done. I've talked about her before. When she was a young woman, she did foolish things because teenagers do foolish things. And she even got arrested for some of those foolish things. But being, you know, a white young woman from a good family, she was met with incredible mercy. But her partner in the crime, who is a young black man, was met with incredible harshness, and he got the most difficult sentence that you could get. And so as a young woman, she made a decision that her calling would be to challenge that injustice and the racism in the system, that she would spend her whole life on that until the system changed or she died, whichever came first. And so on her path, it has led her to establish this group in the Bronx and Brooklyn called Common Justice. It's a fairly significant sized organization now. And if you Google it, the thing that pops up is this: what keeps us safe is not prisons. What keeps us safe? Community. Relationships are what keep us safe. Prisons actually encourage more violence and trauma. That's what they do. But relationships are what save us. Relationships are what heal us. And so what her organization does, this kind of restorative justice model, is when the person who has been harmed is willing, the person who's been harmed and the person who has done the harm is diverted from the prison system, and there's a 15-month process in which they sit down together, and it's a process of amazing accountability on the person who has done the harm. It's different from punishment. Punishment is passive. What does punishment require of you? Just that you don't escape. That's all you have to do, is just endure it. Accountability requires you to completely change. It's a process. It requires you to acknowledge what you've done, to acknowledge the harm that's been done. It centers then on the survivor. The survivor helps generate what solutions would look like. And then with all of this, The goal is to try to come up with what answer could bring the most justice and bring the most healing in the situation. And then the person who's done the harm has to do the very difficult work of becoming a person who would never do such an act again. That's what it's about, right? It's reconciliation. It can't erase the past, right? And people aren't perfect. It's saying, I am going forward in a very different way. My relationships from now on will be marked by something very different. Most of us in this room have pretty charmed lives compared to something like that. And yet, most of us are sitting here with at least a relationship or two that could use a little bit of help, right? A little bit of healing. So a month or two ago, I had one more of those holy moments that I have multiple times a week when I was having a birthday lunch with someone in the church. This someone, I'll call her Becky, I have known maybe 15 or 20 years, and she's like her other people at Peace, radiant and funny and delightful and full of heart and committed and courageous. And, you know, just a person who I so enjoy. And I was sitting there thinking, what a gift this is. And, you know, because it's her birthday lunch and because I do what I do on my birthday lunches, I was asking her about the last year, and I asked her about her marriage, because I've known for as long as I've known her that her marriage has been a challenge. You know, marriage is about what? Chemistry brings you together, and then what it's about? Compatibility. Some people got more compatibility than others, right? And then there's life, which has its own challenges. And then there's, if you're, you know, have children, well, my goodness. You know, you got one daughter who's now okay, and the other daughter decides she's going to get on a camel and walk across, you know, India or ride across India. And you just got all this stuff. And so there's all these challenges. And so all of the time I've known this person, that has been a really challenging thing. And she said, oh my gosh, this has been the most difficult year ever, and things have never been better. And I thought, I mean, you could have knocked me off my chair. I was like, really? She said, yep. And we hit the lowest low. It was over. I finally went to a best friend who has known me forever, and I said, can you tell me what I can do differently? Would you be willing to give me honest feedback about what I'm doing that is contributing to the harm here? And her friend did. She wrote out a long list, and Becky got going at it, right? That's what healing is about. You can't erase the past. We're not newly perfect people. No, it's saying, I am going to do this relationship in a different, fresh way. So Bill Littlefield was in an interview, in a conversation, hour-long conversation at WBUR this summer about his book. And I've seen quite a few interviews with him about the book. And he's often asked about the role of redemption. He was asked about redemption. The questioner said, you know, what do you think about that? You know, it seems like redemption, a belief in redemption, is pretty critical for people who want to work with prisoners. And his answer was so interesting. He started off and he said, redemption is a really big word. And then he said, I believe that people can, and then he stopped. I mean, we could outright change, grow, be different. But instead he switched from the person, and then he said, okay, let me tell you a story. He said, Kurt Vonnegut, you know Kurt Vonnegut, the writer. Kurt Vonnegut has a son named Mark, and Mark, that's in Boston too, is quite the character. Mark Vonnegut, schizophrenic. He's been institutionalized, spent a lot of his life in institutions. He's also brilliant. And he was rejected from medical school 19 times before he was accepted at Harvard. And he became a pediatrician in Boston. And at 75, he's still practicing. And by the way, he's written a remarkable book published in 2010 called Just Like Everyone Else, only more so, about his struggle with schizophrenia and bipolar. That is a phenomenal book. So Kurt Vonnegut and his son Mark were talking about life and about what is the meaning of all of this anyway. And Mark Vonnegut said this, I think this is the purpose of life. We are all here to help one another get through this, whatever this is. And Bill Littlefield said, I think that's pretty good. We are all here to help one another get through this, whatever this is. Oh my gosh, our lives, so much more than a game, right? Such a rich, incredible gift. I mean, really, right? Every day to get up, have the chance to love, have the chance to start again, have the chance to be fresh, have the chance Like Joseph and his crazy brothers, and Joseph and Mary, and all the people we know working in the prisons. My good friend Dan sings with the East Hill Singers, Lansing Prison, every single week. And all the people like Becky. I mean, every single day, right? Every single moment, every single interaction, just a chance to like just be this conduit for love, to just look at the people around us and to just let it kind of flow out of us in a way that's really not finally humanly possible. Love, mercy, grace, healing. What an incredible gift. May we embrace it this day. Amen.